Greetings one and all, and welcome to a much overdue crossover video here on my channel with my good friend, the Game Professor. We worked with each other back on the Gaming Symposium podcast with MC Profit and Aaron Signal, and we've been meeting to finally join forces and talk about a game we both like, analyzing it like we often do. What happened was we ended up going on a bit of a tangential deep dive.
Well, I wouldn't say tangential, it's the subject of the video after all. I'm the Game Professor, and like Red said, we both wanted to get together and talk about a game. And what game is it?
Pretty sure they can tell by the footage at this point.
Wait, you're editing the game footage over this? I was trying to be all mysterious about it.
I also put it in the video's title.
I guess that makes sense. Well, whatever. We're analyzing the characters, themes, and symbolism of
some social commentary. This is my channel, after all. This should be expected at this point.
Today's game, Coffee Talk.
Let's begin, shall we?
Lua and Bailey's might have the most nuanced take on the game's overarching theme. It's easy for stories like this to fall into idealism. If you really love something or someone and work real hard, you can just make it work and it'll be great. Go for your dreams, it'll work out somehow. Coffee Talk is, generally speaking, uninterested in this sort of idealism. It's a game about compromise, struggle, and values. So it makes sense that when it tackles something as close to our real-world challenges as racism, it won't provide an easy answer.
Lua and Bailey's are the most on the nose when it comes to the game's theming about how you need to achieve your happiness. Life isn't going to throw it in your lap. These two are in love, but they're from two different fantasy races who don't normally intermingle. There's some bad blood between the two that the game alludes to throughout.
It's kind of vague about the details, and I think that's intentional. There are challenges and problems inherent in using fantasy races as allegory for real-world racial tension. The comparison is inherently flawed, since fantasy races actually do have significant biological differences between them. It can be easy to succumb to harmful caricatures if they're coded based on real-life racial stereotypes, and the results often end up falling into reductive, rosy savior narratives that are best avoided. Coffee Talk tries to avoid these issues by being a small-scale game focused on its characters. Any details about the world, politics, or institutions are there to fuel that drama. So while it does its best to portray the systemic and cultural elements of racism that so many people tend to gloss over, the story's goal isn't necessarily to advocate for social change so much as to deepen our understanding of these characters and their struggles. This is about Lua and Bailey's falling in love in an environment that's hostile to them, and about how they react to that hostility.
They've been dating for years by the time we meet them in-game, and the two have been rendezvousing in secret for quite some time. Only recently do they come out to their parents about their partner's race. It leads to Bailey's having a falling out with his parents, and Lua's parents not taking too kindly to the situation either. It's implied that elves are snobbish and that they may have been part of the problem with certain intermagical incidents that the succubi were also a part of. But we aren't given that much information about it, only for us to assume that this fantasy racism has its roots in history that we aren't privy to. Through this conflict between the two, confessing about their parents' fantastical racism and how they each want to go about it, it leads to them taking a break. Lua finding family is the most important thing to her, and not wanting to cut her parents out of her life completely, and Bailey's not caring about that sort of thing, willing to give up his immortality for Lua. This is something she confronts him about, giving the logical answer of, what if we break up, then you'll have done this for nothing. In Coffee Talk, we're given more of Lua's point of view than we are of Bailey's. We get to dig into her perspective more when it comes to what the game wants to say overall. The arguably most dramatic moment in the game is Lua's conversation with Hyde about love. Lua speaks about how abandoning your family isn't a solution, and Hyde talks about how if your family can't accept you and the ones you love, you don't need to give them the time of day. How Lua wants to fit everything in a perfect box, and how her actions are putting a tremendous strain on the relationship she has with Bailey's. Since Lua is thinking about how everything is going to turn out terribly, she isn't actually thinking of Bailey's in this scenario. She was only thinking about herself. Lua was allowing her own anxieties about her relationship to cloud her outlook on how things actually are. It's something that we see throughout Coffee Talk as a whole, that fulfilling your dreams, achieving your goals isn't supposed to be easy. It won't always turn out perfect. It's your life, and your decisions will change how things turn out. Lua realizes by pushing Bailey's away for her perfectly happy ever after, she risks losing him forever, losing the family she could have with him. Instead of living in the moment, she chooses to live too far into the future and finds herself lost in it. It's an important lesson for people to learn, especially people in relationships, that I think the game does an excellent job in a single scene.
Meanwhile, Gala, the werewolf who we will get to later, points out to Bailey's that while his willingness to personally sacrifice for Lua is noble, he's not thinking about the sacrifices Lua might need to make. From potential estrangement from her own family to a number of practical, financial, and medical needs Bailey's hasn't had to consider before, on account of, his immortality. And ultimately, the two need to come together to have this conversation with each other, honestly talking out their concerns and needs.
Communication, kids. It makes relationships work.
These conversations force them to look at their options more realistically, and the results are discouraging at first. However revelatory these conversations are, Coffee Talk isn't about easy answers, or sensationalistic happy, or for that matter sad, endings, or good triumphing over evil. It's just about how life is good, but sometimes hard. Which is why Lua and Bailey's stick out so much among the rest of the characters. They don't overcome their difficulties so much as they learn to accept them. And they decide that they're worth the trouble. They face the problem head on, do the work to understand it and themselves, and decide as one to press on. Despite the social issues at play, it's more about their understanding of themselves, each other, and the realities of their situation than anything else. It's about recognizing when sacrifices must be made, and making them with full knowledge of what you're doing and why. It's about taking what you want, but being smart and thoughtful enough to know what you have to give up to get it.
They come to a compromise by the end, and through all the hardship and harsh realities of making interracial relationships work, their bond as a couple is stronger for it, tying in beautifully with Coffee Talk's emphasis on how, in this world, you have to work for your happy endings. Gala and Hyde have an interesting message as individual characters. They're both established in their careers, similarly to Myrtle and Aqua, who we will get to later, yet they have no desire to rise within their jobs into a higher paid position. No, I think the two desire a sense of normalcy in their lives. Gala is a werewolf and Hyde is a vampire who met over a century ago, and have been friends ever since.
They're a bit different from most of these characters in that neither of them are chasing dreams so much as they're just trying to live normal lives amidst decidedly abnormal circumstances. Most notably, they each have a condition inherent to who they are as people that makes it difficult for them to live seamlessly with the rest of society.
Hyde is a vampire who has been through hardship himself with his divorce, his own physical needs as a vampire being fulfilled with synthetic blood, or with any human blood that may get snuck to him by a certain hospital employee.
And Gala is a werewolf, which means he regularly poses a legitimate risk to others and must use safe locations and oftentimes some form of sedative to protect the people around him.
Within the stories, both characters have their own social groups outside one another, but always meet up within Coffee Talk, which was the very bar they met in years ago. We see them start to re-establish their old relationship here and play a substantial role in other characters' stories as well as their own. The two help various people throughout their troubles in their lives with good advice rather than anything superfluous. They've lived for hundreds of years and have learned how to help others through their actions. Moreover, Gala himself works at a hospital and helps people all the time. We see him change into a werewolf the first time after he self-sacrificed to allow people in the hospital to take the last safe rooms and sedatives. This is after a shortage of the new medications for the werewolf frenzy.
That gets to the thing I personally find most fascinating about these characters and their conditions. Neither of them are social outcasts, at least not in any major way. Society has made an effort to accommodate them. Scientists are working on a sedative to keep werewolf transformations in check, companies are working on a synthetic blood alternative for vampires, and hospitals have special spaces where werewolves can stay for the duration of their rage if the need arises. There are still social difficulties, like how Gala has to debunk the myth that werewolves keep their rage in check with BDSM orgies, or how Hyde talks about the need to constantly frame the truth about himself to accommodate the people around him. Similar to the racism allegory in Lua and Bailey's story, there are imperfections in using fantasy races like this, but we see that even as society changes to ensure everyone has the same opportunities, there are lingering pressures that aren't immediately noticeable to others, but no doubt cause some degree of harm to the characters themselves. But overall, it's cool to see how this society has worked to accommodate them.
But that accommodation isn't perfect. Gala experiences something many of us in real life suffer through, and that's a lack of medication for his specific chronic illness. The world of Coffee Talk may be built around the concept of fantasy creatures living in our world in relative harmony, but it's also based off of the follies in the real world. Gala desperately looking for normalcy despite his feral tendencies. Hyde, on the other hand, has more complexity in regards to his advice on Lua and relationships, but his hardships outside of being a divorcee don't play a substantial role in his story, or at least not enough to mention. Though the way he follows Gala around like a puppy dog, puppy dog, get it? Shows that his desire for companionship is strong. With him always meeting up with Gala at the shop, it shows him wanting to get into some sort of a routine and that he may have had with his ex-wife. While Gala's story shows the desperate desire for normalcy a little better, I do think that their stories work well together. It also helps all their endings have them end up with each other at the end, implying but not quite stating that their relationship is going to last for another couple hundred years.
Georgie is kind of a strange figure in the game, all things considered, in that he's the only one who doesn't seem to have any kind of arc. I could say he's here to be a wise counterpart to the other characters, as that does seem to be a role he fills, but that feels a little redundant. Pretty much all the characters share wisdom with each other at one point or another, because that's one of the game's recurring themes. Whatever our struggles, we can learn from each other's experiences and the wisdom they've earned through them. I don't know, it feels to me like they might have had more plans for him, but cut them or something, because he's the only character that feels truly superfluous. He's charming and kind, and I enjoyed his presence, he just doesn't seem to contribute anything to the game's message, and that's kind of weird in this game. It doesn't help that, in the US at least, we're living through a moment where portraying the police as wise, helpful, and 100% here for your safety and comfort is a little dicey, to say the least. But let's approach this optimistically, and say that Georgie is supposed to be a representative of authority, appropriately utilized for the benefit of the average person. Even so, how exactly does he fit into what the game is saying overall? He never really exercises his authority over any situation in-game, and while he does put his position to use for some of the characters, those instances come across more like plot devices than character development, like using his connections to do a background check on Rachel's manager, or providing some exposition about the raid on said manager's party later on. I don't know, I had trouble pegging this one. Did you have any better luck, Red?
Well, while I see no problem with having a minor character like this in Coffee Talk, the role he plays unfortunately lends himself to a specific media term/trope that's been prevalent in our stories for quite a while now, which is the magical black man trope.
Oh.
Yeah. It's defined as follows. In order to show the world that minorities' characters aren't bad people, one will step forward to help a quote-unquote normal person with their pure heart and folksy wisdom. They are usually black and or poor, but they may come in a form of another oppressed minority. They step, often clad in a clean white suit, into the life of a much more privileged, and in particular almost always white, central character, and in some way enrich the central character's life. While you could say that the game averts this by most of the characters being all sorts of magical races, you'll note that Freya, the character that gets arguably the most development out of anyone in the story, is white. Georgie himself appears in most scenes that have her in it, giving her advice and the like. His inclusion in the game is to explain what's going on in the world of Coffee Talk, which is also accomplished by the newspaper entries we see at the beginning of every day. He's more of a device for the narrative rather than a complete character, which is fine in theory. Having minor characters to flesh out the universe isn't a bad thing. It's that the game itself goes out of its way to give development to the other characters that Georgie helps, to the point where you're sitting there wondering why he's given any backstory in the first place. His entire point is to spew out exposition, or be the one sane man in the room in a variety of conversations. I don't think the developers intentionally made Georgie a redundant character that didn't matter to the story as a whole. He only ended up that way. Georgie is honestly the weakest part of the story and could have been removed with little to no impact.
The thing that stands out most to me about Myrtle and Aqua, on a thematic and literary level, of course, is that they're adorable and they deserve to be together forever.
That's it! The segment's over. Everybody can go home. Everywhere you look, everywhere it's a heart, it's a heart. My bad attempt at humor aside, these two are my favorite of the more couple-like duos that are on here.
We see their relationship develop too, which is nice since, unlike most romance stories out there, most of this game's romantic pairings are already established, so it's cute to see one begin instead.
Myrtle works on a popular Metal Gear Solid-esque series, and at the beginning of the story is shown to be stony and unfocused on the other denizens of the shop. We don't find out a lot about her until Aqua starts coming in, and the two hit it off right away. I ship it. We found out that Aqua is working in the field she wants, developing a small indie game of her own. She's struggling to put it out there and finds herself afraid of taking any big risks. That is something that a lot of working adults feel when they take a major gamble on their chosen career, or even their side career. Putting yourself out there for the people of the world to see isn't easy for anyone, and Aqua is one of those people, or mer people, who are shy about doing so. Myrtle and Aqua are already skilled workers in their respective fields, but with Myrtle, she's already doing what she loves while suffering for it. Coffee Talk covers the controversial subject of crunch time with Myrtle's storyline. What's interesting about this is that it shows that Myrtle doesn't like the practice, but she does nothing to alleviate her own stress. Since Myrtle has never taken a vacation before, she's done nothing but pursue her passion. Both Myrtle and Aqua are working hard to achieve their goals, but they have something holding them back from being truly happy. For Myrtle, she's a workaholic, constantly driven to produce, but experiences less of the joy than she used to while pursuing her dream. This leads to an interesting comparison to modern-day content creators on various platforms, being driven to do their best and produce a product at a breakneck speed, or they'll lose followers, risking losing their jobs, their very livelihoods.
This demonstrates that the difficulty of living your dreams doesn't end when you theoretically achieve them. Myrtle is working on a game series she loves. She has a stable job she's passionate about. Theoretically, that means she's won, right? She's living the dream. But it still comes with challenges, both external, like the abuse she suffers from her workplace, and internal, like her tendency to excuse this abuse because she cares about her work. This is also why the game's commentary on crunch culture fits in so well. It's not just commentary on an industry-wide problem, but a rather inspired embodiment of this kind of struggle. Myrtle accomplished her goals, but now the position she's worked so hard for is being used against her, almost like they're holding her hostage. You're not being treated well, but that's the job. You're lucky to have your dream job. Don't you want your dream job?
Myrtle has a poor work-life balance, and we find out Myrtle hasn't been using any of her vacation hours. This, of course, changes when Aqua, who is nervous about completing her first game, comes into Myrtle's life. Myrtle helps test the game, and the two start working together on it. This leads to Myrtle helping Aqua get a table at the indie booth at this universe's version of PAX. Aqua is nervous about this, but Myrtle offers to come with her, leading them to go off on a vacation together, while helping Aqua pursue the thing she loves. Aqua is coming out of her shell and is less nervous around people, with Myrtle learning to relax. The two act more natural around one another, and it's as if by finding each other and sharing their mutual struggles, they found someone who truly understands them. Their stories couldn't be separate. They have to be alongside each other like this to show how similarly and how different the two are, as well as how they fit together perfectly. Being a teenager is hard because at that age, you don't think your parents understand anything. Whether or not they do or don't varies from case to case, and oftentimes parents are trying to look after their children when all it seems like they're doing is trying to smother them. I'm no family therapist, but working with teenagers, running programs for them, and later meeting with their parents, I can tell this is a common trend. As a teenager, all you want to do is to achieve whatever lofty dreams you have, and whether or not they're realistic, that's your number one focus. What you'll have to do to achieve those dreams is not necessarily a priority. Rachel is a cat girl, but she's still a teenager who wants to go on with her singing career after she's left her pop idol group, only for her father to advise her against working with the people she's picked out for herself.
I too don't have children of my own, but I've worked with both children and a lot of frustrated, often technophobic, parents, and I feel confident saying that many parents have trouble engaging with their children's interests and ambitions in a constructive manner, and Rachel's dad, Henry, is no exception. Parents often tend to reject out of hand anything that worries or confuses them, trying to keep their children away from it rather than understand and support them through it. It's the guiding star of everything from abstinence-only sex education to parents who refuse to buy their children a gaming console, and needless to say, it never works, and often tends to backfire. In all fairness to Henry, his fear is based on experience rather than ignorance, but he still makes this same mistake in how he handles it.
They're both coming from a place of good intentions, and they want their individual voices to be heard.
When it comes to parents and their children, though, that doesn't often happen without some kind of conflict.
That looks to be the case here as well. To Rachel, her father is trying to actively sabotage her dreams and is telling her that she can't be independent despite legally being an adult. We first meet Rachel after she's gotten into an argument with her father about her new manager, having fled the house in her feline form. After some pretty hilarious misunderstandings, she explains a story that many teens have talked about to their friends or complete strangers when they know their parents aren't around. Her dad doesn't understand her or her dreams, he's getting in the way, she's being treated like she's a child. While not a teenager exclusive problem, this is the age where all the small conflicts at the dinner table can result in full-blown screeching matches with no one side winning or losing in the end. Rachel speaks about how her father's behavior has only worsened after her mother died, or that maybe her mother was the only referee stopping things from escalating to this level.
Her mother is a really important piece of the puzzle here, I think. Henry now lives for his daughter. When he left the increasingly corrupt music industry with his wife, he gave up one life's goal for another, his family. Now, his daughter is all that remains of that purpose. He's seen her enter into a world that he knows all too well, and since his primary motivator is concern for her safety rather than her success or happiness, the only thing he knows to do is try and stop her. If the game is asking its characters how to accomplish their dreams in a messy, imperfect world, Henry's answer is just to get as far away from the messiness as possible, even if that means Rachel sacrificing her dream. This kind of extreme approach is inherently inflexible, and it drives Rachel away from him. If you truly believe the only way to be safe from the messiness of the world is to abstain from it, all nuance and moderation is kind of inherently off the table. It's all or nothing. And that's not his decision to make when it comes to Rachel's life. His concern may be for her, but his desire to keep her safe has no room for her happiness or ambitions, and his inflexibility does nothing but push her further away from him and toward the very danger he's trying to protect her from.
To Rachel's credit, she knows that her dad isn't doing this to hurt her, but she feels suffocated by him. It's implied that she's still mourning the death of her mother alongside him, and both are being harsher than they'd normally be. The death of her mother left the entire family out of sorts, trying to fill the void that she once filled. Rachel's mother had been very supportive of Rachel's dream and had encouraged her every step of the way. In that sense, this ties into Rachel's desire to cling onto this dream, as though she's clinging onto the memory of her mother. Rachel believes that her father is in direct opposition to this. That makes him the enemy. With this, she moves forward with her career choices, not looking at the full picture. Her manager has predatory friends, and through newspaper clippings, it is revealed that her father was right to warn about them. Rachel was too set upon furthering her career to look for the signs right in front of her, but her heart was in the right place. Rachel is beloved by her fans, and rather than leaving the music industry, her climb to solo artist superstardom is only emblazoned further, deciding to stay in the industry and allowing her dad to help guide her career, all while staying in complete control over it. That said, the game never goes out of its way to shame Rachel for her actions in following her passions. If anything, it was taking both her and her father's side, telling them that they were both valid in their approaches, if a little misguided.
That's very true. Henry turns out to be right about the danger Rachel faced, but the story doesn't end with her backing out like he wanted her to. It ends with him getting back in the game so he can act as her guide.
Rachel not seeing the danger right in front of her because of her own pride could have led to her career going down quite a different path than she envisioned. However, if she left the industry like her father had, she would have been filled with regret over a dream never realized.
And Hendry had to come to terms with the fact that, as a parent to a child in an imperfect and sometimes dangerous world, he could be a more positive force in her life by taking an active and affirming role, rather than a passive and sheltering one.
Well, I have absolutely nothing on Neil.
Oh, really? I wrote a whole thing about him. Want me to take this segment?
Please, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, I get it. Neil is a weird one to dig into. Their basic arc is pretty much just like everyone else in the game. They want to do a thing, they face challenges, they learn to accept and or overcome them. And they just want to date people. That's like the most relatable motivation ever. But between their otherworldliness and the way they kind of disappear partway through the game until revealing the barista's secret at the end, it's not as relatable as it could be. But I don't think they're here for their arc when it comes down to it. They're more of a lens to explore the things we take for granted about how complicated humanity can be. Like, okay, you know when you try to give tech support to your parents and you tell them to go to their ringtone settings in their phone and they're like, what does that even mean? You know, to you, who changed your ringtone to a different Evanescence song every day in middle school, that's a stupid question. You don't even think about how you scroll from the top of your phone, then scroll down again to get to more settings, then tap the little gear, then navigate to sound settings, then down to ringtones, but each individual step in that process is a complete unknown to them. So think kind of like that, but with people instead of smartphones. Neil comes from a planet that's basically a hive mind, where everyone has a complete physical, emotional, and psychological connection to each other at all times. Concepts like communication, love, even sex, they require no effort within their species. Everyone knows their desires, motivations, and attitudes at all times. So in short, they have no idea how to connect with humans, each of whom has a completely separate consciousness from the others. Not in an ooh so adorkable sort of way, but legitimately, absolutely no concept of how interpersonal communication works. And sometimes that kind of perspective shift can help us see things more clearly. It's a kind of satire almost, but I think it might be more closely related to observational comedy, looking at normal, everyday things through an exaggerated lens so we can see it in a different way than we do in our everyday lives. And that's not very far removed from the game's central theme of how the complexities of our lives hinder our ambitions. It helps us see how many of these small, everyday, invisible elements of the human experience complicate our lives too, not just big ideas like racism, crunch culture, or industry-wide sexism. So yeah, Neil doesn't have much of a specific thematic contribution to the game, but I think they do contribute something by bringing our attention down to the little details of our lives and how really this is all kind of complicated from the get-go.
Freya is the first character we are introduced to in Coffee Talk, and her storyline is what sets all the other events in motion for the game. Think of it as a catalyst in the Coffee Talk timeline. Her desire to become a novelist while she's working over in her job at the local newspaper. She's successful in her own right, but she wants more. Like every self-respecting Disney princess.
Red?
What? Tell me I'm wrong.
Oh no, I believe you're spot on. She's a writer who's successful in her job. You could say she's almost there, but wants more out of her life and career, and when offered a chance to let it go, jump into the unknown, and pursue a book deal, she figures, why should I worry? I'll face my fears, write a whale of a tale, and see how far I'll go. Maybe I can go the distance.
I should have known that something like this was going to happen when I referenced Disney princesses, yet these results are beyond my expectations.
Why, thank you.
You are most certainly welcome. Now allow us to proceed. Freya is the character I was able to understand the most from a personal perspective. You see, outside of YouTube, the library, and the work I occasionally do in game journalism, I write prose on the side. I have for a long time, but I haven't gotten to the point where I've been offered a book deal or anything of that nature. I'd like to, but it's part of my own dream that's been put on the shelf for now. So a character like Freya is interesting for me to dissect in regards to her character arc. She's a woman who is driven by what she wants in life, and the moment she finds herself idle at her job, however successful she may be, she decides to change it and pursue a different career in the form of novel writing. From what she describes in-game, it seems it'll be a contemporary piece set in an alternative version of Earth, also known as our Earth. The game hangs a lampshade over Bailey and Lua's romance with Freya, as she notes that in her story they'd be star-crossed lovers but different races of humans rather than different races of monsters. The barista asks if that's wise since it wipes monsters out entirely, but Freya says the other monsters will be represented by different human races, leaving an interesting, albeit not so subtle, lampshade on the world around us. Freya does this for all of the other characters as well, recording their own individual journeys and using them for her book, directly taking the role of the POV character rather than the inactive barista character that we get to play as. We are supposed to be seeing the world from her eyes, therefore it's like we're her readers in her upcoming books.
Unlike the barista, theoretically the POV character in game terms, Freya has her own character arc. It is, of course, in line with the game's overall themes, and her unique twist is that it's relatively all or nothing, and her core struggle is in balancing her own needs with her ambitions.
She's a character who's committing herself to one dream but promptly loses her safety net once she's fired from her job as a journalist. Freya is working so hard on her novel that she neglects the job actually paying her, leaving her with the distinct possibility that if she fails at this, she'll lose everything. An all or nothing gamble on a dream that may not even pan out. It's this reckless decision that she's making that benefits her and is also her bane throughout the whole game. Freya struggles to write a decent storyline, her thoughts are cattywampus, and she isn't getting anywhere. The pressure only builds when she's fired from her job, and this leads to several instances of her neglecting her health for the sake of her work. Her ambition drives her, but there's a point where her drive can only do so much. Freya reaches this while she's on the verge of passing out, and you have the option to give her coffee to have her stay awake, or, as an alternative, allowing her to sleep.
This arc serves to differentiate between necessary acceptable risk and unnecessary detrimental risk. Destabilizing her financial security is the kind of risk Freya kind of has to take, and the kind of risk that she can, theoretically, bounce back from if necessary. It's risky, it's scary, it involves sacrifice, but it's also a justifiable and necessary step. Her sleep deprivation, on the other hand, is a risk that inherently doesn't pay off. The risk and reward here is clear, her own health and mental acuity in exchange for more time to write what she has to write. But that loss affects the quality of her writing, which is why the player has to force her to take a nap if her book is going to turn out alright. Her arc is, at least in part, about the importance of taking care of yourself in pursuit of your goals, not only for the sake of your health, but your dreams themselves as well.
While she ends up publishing her book either way in different endings, if you let her sleep, her book is more popular because she was able to rest her mind. When writing extensively, even through the night, yes, you can come up with some amazing, show-stealing, heart-stopping moments for your writing. You could be the next Stephen King, Nora Roberts, or John Grisham, selling millions of copies to fans everywhere. But that's not as important as your health.
Of similar importance is the subject of the book itself, how she applies what she sees to her own thoughts and stories. Freya's book idea, a story about prejudice in a world with only humans, serves as another lens for the player to apply what they're seeing in the game to their own understanding of reality. It's a fairly simple commentary that lampshades the imperfections of fantasy allegories. It seems utterly ridiculous that prejudice and discrimination would still exist when there's only one species instead of many. And yet, as we know all too well, they do anyway. The intent here, I think, is similar to Neil's purpose in the game, to take us out of the basic facts of our reality that we take for granted in hopes of helping us see things in a fresh way. It's also here to further ground the game in realistic expectations. It may feel a little cynical to believe that if we didn't have the problems we do, we'd just have different problems, but whether the game believes that or not, Coffee Talk isn't really about solving problems, but accepting and working through them. I think you were onto something, Red, when you said Freya is more the POV character than the barista. If anything, the barista is more like the game itself, and Freya is us, watching, considering, and ultimately applying what she sees to her own life and pursuits. If she can learn from what she sees every day in this curious little nighttime cafe, then so can we.
For a game that has such a simple premise, Coffee Talk has intricate sets of characters with their own themes interwoven throughout the story.
It's what drew us to talking about the game in the first place. It's just a relaxing, down-to-earth experience about people talking about their problems in a coffee shop.
Does Neil count as being out of this world then?
I should have seen that one coming.
You wrote the segment about him. You really should have.
Well, on a more personal note, Red and I are both grown adults, or at least, we're trying our best. Every one of these characters is just trying to get by and be happy in a world that can sometimes feel pretty hostile to that goal, and we felt that on a pretty deep level.
Which is the strongest part of coffee talk for us. We can talk your ear off all day about what these characters mean in the grand scheme of things. We can talk about the hidden endings and the slight alterations in the story when you fail. Yet, in the end, coffee talk, as a piece of contemporary modern fiction, works.
Contemporary modern fiction plus fantasy creatures, which makes it better.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if I saw a supernatural coffee shop, I'd never leave.
Oh, absolutely, it would be my home from then on. And I agree 100% about its nature as modern fiction. Sure, there are mermaids and werewolves and horny, confused aliens, but the story isn't an epic quest or a chosen one narrative. The fantastical elements are there to give us a different perspective on our own everyday lives. It's about one barista running their coffee shop, listening to the problems of everyone that comes in.
It's about a human, or humanoid in this case, connection between two individuals who are trying to make it through their daily lives.
Sharing and commiserating over a cup of their favorite warm beverage of choice.
Like how we're doing the same over a video game?
Exactly.
I'm Red Angel.
And I'm the game professor.
And I'll see you next time.
I won't, because this is Red's show, not mine.
Sam gets to go back home, and all of you get to hear me next time. I hope you have a wonderful day/evening, my dearest fledglings.